I am very excited to announce the MiX Insight Analyser platform. It has been a passion of mine for many, many years, working with MiX telematics and with telematics data to provide a platform where we can start combining all of our data and more intuitive methods of seeing data and dashboards, and that provides us with the ability to see information that allows us to have answers without having to go into a lot of in-depth analysis and detail. So without further ado, I want to actually log on to the MiX Insight Analyser application. So we use the Click Sense platform as our method of providing the BI solution. And in the Click Sense platform, each user will have the ability to actually log in, and based on their security credentials, they will be able to see the databases that they have access to. So this also means that you will have the ability to see multiple databases in one platform. I have not logged onto the application as yet. I know that you all can only see our MiX Insight Analyser screen at this point in time, but I'd just like to give you an intro first to understand the concept of how we started. Another very positive point of using the MiX Insight Analyser platform is that for your big corporate companies that has multiple databases, and over time you might have had databases created in our ZA or in our enterprise platform, you will now be able to actually see all of those databases in one screen and in one view. So if you've got a fleet of 5 vehicles or 20 vehicles or 500 vehicles, MiX Insight Analyser will provide you with interactive information to manage your fleet proactively. So let's start. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, here we go. MiX Insight Analyser can be viewed in multiple web applications. So like for browsers, like for instance, your Opera, your Chrome, or Safari. I'm specifically working in Safari. So for those Mac users who like using Safari, it works fantastic in Safari. MiX Insight Analyser has on the left-hand side a few categories of what is available within the application. And the first one that we can see is our status board, and then we've got an analyzer category. I'm going to explain a little bit more detail regarding this. What is nice on this can also be hidden by clicking on this little icon at the top, so which allows you to be able to visualize the information that you want to see in a full screen. This is also fantastic if you want to put this onto a TV screen in an operational room. We've got multiple supervisors, or in the managers, or even the owner's office, where he can see what is happening in his fleet during the course of the day. On the far right-hand side, we also have a selection criteria option where you can go and select multiple databases depending on your access level, asset or driver site information, driver status details, driver name if you want to go into specific driver's information, and then obviously your date range selections that you can make on the right-hand side. This can also be hidden then from the screen. Because Click Sense provides you with the ability to see information interactively, a lot of these fields that's in the screen that you can see now allows you to go and click on a selection, and it immediately updates that information on the screen that you are viewing. I've not logged in for a minute, so I'm just going to refresh my screen. So the first one that we're focusing on is our status board. And the reason why we created the status board is to allow an operational room to be able to see information live as it is occurring. The information is updating every 20 minutes into the application, and it tells you since 12 o'clock last night how many drivers has been active and how many total drivers you have on your database. It also tells you how many active drivers have been, active assets have been on the move since 12 o'clock last night, and how many total assets you have on your database. Now, the reason why I'm saying since 12 o'clock last night is I want to be able to see what's happening in my business right now. So from 12 o'clock midnight, it will start from scratch, so from zero, and it will start updating the information as the vehicle starts moving within your fleet, and it will give you a status continuously. And every 20 minutes, it will update that information and tell you what's happening in the fleet. We're currently looking at a site view, and this is actually quite nice to use if you want to select very specific sites and only see that information for those specific sites. This is quite nice to use on a supervisor level where you have specific vehicles being viewed by a group of people and they only want to monitor those vehicles. I've now changed it to view on an asset level. So we can currently see in the 2 sites that I have selected, we have over 547 vehicles. And since midnight last night, 362 have gone onto the road. The same would apply to drivers. If I select drivers, it will show the same information on a driver level. And it provides you with a summary per asset currently that tells you their current driving time in the last 24 hours. And based on the drivers that's driven in those specific vehicles, what the score is associated to those vehicles driven, if they are active. And the active status is based on vehicles that are parked off and not being used, or active within the fleet and in the active site. To summarize the top screen that you see over here that we've got in red, these are the typical questions that any operator of a fleet would ask when they're managing a fleet. So I'd like to describe it by saying the dashboard is telling us a story. And when I'm managing my fleet, this information needs to immediately give me a highlight of what is happening within my fleet. So when you walk in and you look at your 500 vehicles, how many vehicles left late this morning? These events are set up on a server side and we can configure it on the MiX Fleet Manager platform. And this gives it a great advantage as well. Your specific requirements are set up based on events on the database. So we don't have to go and make those changes on the actual BI platform, but it's only taking the information that has been sent from MiX Fleet Manager and displaying it for you in the BI platform. In the stopped in the no-go zone, these would be based on the locations that you have created on the database and where a vehicle is actually stopped in a no-go zone, and it will give you the driver and the asset name and the time that the driver stopped into that no-go zone. And immediately you can ask the question, who stopped in the no-go zone? What did we do about it? What was the reason for that? High-risk drivers, I can go and select our high-risk drivers to see who they are. I've currently selected assets, so this will show me on which drivers the high-risk driver event occurred. Or I can then go and change it to go and actually display that information to see it on the driver list specifically. So I can see these are associated to the drivers that drove this morning. And let's select the drivers, and we can see who the high-risk drivers are. Now, high-risk drivers are based on a very important facet that's being, how can I say, as an alert factor in a lot of businesses out there today, and that is the management of fatigue. I know that a lot of businesses are spending money to put in very fancy cameras and methods to actually manage if the driver is blinking his eyes or not looking on the road so that we can manage fatigue. But I believe very strongly you can very simply go and manage fatigue management by looking at your number of hours that the driver has been operational. So in this case, it will be based on the fact that the driver has either exceeded in the yellow his 12 hours driving time, or in the red his 15 hours driving time. So then you're going to say, but Heidi, this one is showing me a 0. What this means is this driver has already exceeded his 15 hours driving time, but he's actually not been active today. Which means, so even though in the last 24 hours he has exceeded his 15 hours, we should not allocate this driver to the next trip that's allocated. And based on the information provided, you can then informatively decide which drivers I need to allocate to the next wave of deliveries that need to occur without exceeding their driving hours in the last 24 hours. This information is updated on a rolling 24 hours, which means every 20 minutes as the information updated. If those drivers were active in a vehicle, we will accumulate the total driving hours in the data that is seen. The next one is our possible impact. And the possible impact is quite an exciting one. So this one is based on our 3-axis accelerometer that's fitted in our FM professional unit. And we can configure it to actually record a low impact or a high impact incident. And it's based on the G-forces that is recorded on the unit, which means you can see the severity of that impact that occurred on the vehicle. Now, when you're managing your fleet, a lot of the time you'll have your workshop manager arrive and say, you had to replace a whole wheel rim because the rim was hit on a curb, and you don't know when it occurred, you don't know where the incident occurred, or who was driving the vehicle when the incident occurred. With a low impact event, you could very easily go and investigate similar type of incidents and go and determine if there were damage at a low impact event. So typically, if a driver goes too fast over a speed hump, or if he hits a pothole, it will also trigger these low impact events, which will give you a timestamp and who was in the vehicle when the incident occurred. Then we have our drivers with no rest, which is based on events as well. So the drivers with no rest would be very specific to continuous driving hours, and those are associated to your fuel and gas industry type of incidents and occurrences. Our assets in the workshop would be related to vehicles that's been in the workshop for longer than 12 hours. But with this event, it's completely configurable. I have selected to actually set this account up to let me know if a vehicle has been in a workshop for more than 12 hours. You can go and define and say, no, 12 hours might be too a short period of time for escalation. I want to know if it's been in the vehicle for at least 72 hours, and it will show you the exception event. Please note that the workshops are still defined by a location on the MiX Fleet Manager application, which means once we picked up that the vehicle is parked in that workshop area that you've marked on the map in MiX Fleet Manager, we will go and define how long has that vehicle been in that location, and then we'll highlight it for you that's in the workshop. So typically, if you walk into the office and somebody tells you, we need to go and rent a vehicle because I'm short of assets to go and do specific deliveries, you can very easily go and say, but why do I have 5 vehicles that's sitting in my workshop? How long have they been there? What is outstanding to get them out of the workshop and back on the road to start giving us money? So these are the typical dashboard occurrences that we can view. The overview again allows us to see the information on a very high level, giving us the total distance traveled, the fuel used, which is based on the CAN bus information. So that would be the fuel used that is recorded through the CAN bus, and the kilometers per liter would be based on the CAN information. We refer to that as measured fuel usage, and it will only be available on the vehicles that allows us to actually record the can fuel used on the assets. Moving over to look at the driver information, I'm also looking at the overview, and I want to be able to show you that we're also working on an overall scoring parameter that we can see in the dashboard. Now, if you want to be able to expand the view of the information that you see on the screen, you could very easily go and use a little button on the right-hand side, and you'll see it across the board on all of our screens, where you can actually go and expand your view and full screen go and see the information that is related to what you want to view. Clicking the button again would minimize that view back into its allocation within the page. When we look at our list view here, we can also go and allocate how we want to actually update that information. So as you can see, it is currently updating the data again into the screen. But each of those columns can be dragged around so that it can, you can view the information that is specific to what you want to see on the screen. Because the status board is active, we typically don't go and select a date selection for the screen. We have our average weighted score, and this would be our driver score for today. So we can see for this specific driver that his average score is 95%, but right now driving in a vehicle, it is 95%. So we can already see the performance is not a positive view, and this would then be across the board where your conditional formatting will show you exceptions on each of your drivers. Remember when I showed you about the high-risk drivers? As you will see here, the driving time on the left-hand side also will highlight for you in the conditional formatting through colors the detail required for the high-risk drivers. Now, from our status board, we're going to go into the analyzer portion. And this is where things really start getting exciting, because this is where we start looking at bulk data, that we can start looking at trend analysis and more. So the first one we have categorized is our utilization dashboard. So currently, I don't have a selection criteria in the utilization dashboard over here, but I can go and select a specific year and a specific month for that matter. And as you see, as I'm making my selections, it will update the information in my screen. Just quickly to explain, on the top left-hand side, you will see your selection criteria that you have made. And you could very easily go and unselect your selection from here, and then go and reselect your selection if you want to go and change it. We also have the ability to clear all selections on the screen, or you're able to go back to any of your selections that you have made through the left-hand buttons. We're currently looking at a summarized dashboard that is based on April 2020's information for a selected sites. So in here, we can see the total number of assets, the total distance driven, the average kilometers per asset per day, the average per weekday, and the average per weekend. And again, on the right-hand side, we're able to actually display the liters per 100 kilometer used, and have the ability to actually see, based on a trend, how the fleet performed during the course of the month that has been selected. On the right-hand side, we can again see a summary compared to your average weekday usage and your average weekend usage. This allows you to also go into detailed information per asset, where you will be able to see the information for the fleet based on fleet, registration number, make, model, total distance traveled, and then your averages, where you can see also through conditional formatting if the average per asset is above or below what the average was for the selected sites or for the business. This allows you to very easily be able to calculate your cents per kilometer and see how you're performing month to month, and go into detailed information. Also allows you to go and select very specific to make and model vehicles and see how specific make and model of vehicles are operating within that fleet. Based on the same selection, we can then go into more detailed information. And it provides you again with summary that can be expanded. And we will shortly be releasing the facility to be able to export all of these into a report as well. The reason why it is not currently there is because this is created for you to be able to actually interact with the data, really drill down to the detail of the information to tell you a story of what is happening within your fleet. The next one I'm going to go into is your scoring dashboards. And this is where things really start getting exciting. This really relates to the performance and how things are being managed within your fleet regarding driver performance. Just as you would find a MiX Fleet Manager application, you have the ability to go and change your red, amber, and green selection criteria, and it will update it at the top, as you can see. We manage the 6 standard events, which is harsh braking, harsh acceleration, overspeeding, over-revving, excessive idle, and out of green man driving. From here, you have the ability to actually go and see your trend by day of the month or by week. And if you've got a few months that you want to compare, so if I, for instance, want to go and compare since January, you can add the information and then compare the information month to month to see if you have been improving your performance overall. This will very easily highlight areas of interest of where performance needs to be improved. And through experience of analyzing information over multiple databases, we have identified that some of the core focus areas that most clients need to focus on is on overspeeding and excessive idle. So in each of these parameters, we can see the current overspeeding for the period selected against the average for that business. And we can very clearly see through the color indicators where we need to add a little bit more attention to see if we can improve it. And based on overspeeding and excessive idle, we've also been able to prove that those are the 2 biggest facets of cost efficiency that can be made. So the moment you start seeing an improvement of performance for overspeeding and excessive idle, you can immediately associate it to an improved cost per kilometer as well. Since excessive idle is based on just wasting diesel on a vehicle not operating, we can definitely see that that can be improved. At the bottom, we also have the ability across a complete database to see what the ranking is within your fleet. So for this purpose, I'm going to unselect our selection for our database to look at all of the assets or the whole fleet for this database. And again, looking at the range from January until April for 2020. And on here, I then want to go and focus on a specific site to see what their performance is. And then it allows you to actually go in a little bit more detail on a site level. Here we go. So now we again, for the period since January to April, can see the performance per month for that specific site. We can then change it to see what the week by week performance was and where there was fluctuations within that fleet. And we can even go down to date for that selection period. At the bottom, again, it starts giving us a trend and an analysis for each of those 6 standard scoring events that we are monitoring. And again, we see overspeed and excessive idle jumping out. Now remember, we're only looking at one site, and we're looking at a period from January until April for 2020. So since our excessive idling scored at 88%, let's go a little bit more detail regarding scoring. On our left-hand side, we have a dashboard that's allocated to scoring, to idling only. So we can immediately, from our scoring dashboard, keeping our selection criteria, go and look at idling for that same period. And immediately, you will see a comparison between your total idling time to your excessive idling time. You have the ability to go and set a target. And this will show you what your idle variance is to the target that you've selected. And remember, this can be customized to how you want to monitor or improve that target at the end of the day. And also that you find is acceptable to be able to implement. As we can see, since January, we have an increase of excessive idle. And I quickly want to give a brief explanation between the variance between idle and excessive idle. We know that the vehicle needs to be able to idle when it's operating. Excessive idle is based on the parameter that you as the client set up to say, I allow a driver to stand and idle for 3 or 5 minutes. Those are acceptable periods every time the vehicle is standing and idling. But then something needs to happen. Either the ignition needs to be switched off or the vehicle needs to travel again to its next destination. But wastage is then seen as based on that time being exceeded. And this is where it's perfect in what we are displaying to you to show you the variance between your normal idling time. And this is the total idling time for that same period from January until March for wasted idling time. So in our idling module, we've also built in a cost model. Now, this cost model is based on the algorithm that we have put into the system that allows us to identify the total liters that has been wasted in an hour of excessive idling. We know what the cost is for diesel within South Africa. We have linked the model to the standard AA rates of diesel within South Africa, meaning we include the fluctuation of diesel costs per month. And we've incorporated that algorithm to then work out based on the total idling of excessive idling hours. We can say what the wasted cost would be based on the standard diesel price within South Africa. Now, if we look at it, you will see that based on a 4-month period, this is quite a lot of money that can be saved. And we can immediately go to the top 10 drivers that is affecting that cost immediately, meaning you can go and attend to that driver and understand why they're standing and idling. For that matter, you can even go down to see which vehicle that driver drove to go and understand in which vehicle was that cost applicable when it occurred. Now, you're going to say, but Heidi, I've got tankers within my fleet, or I have another device that is dependent on the engine idling, and how does that incorporate it? And this is where the FM Premium unit is fantastic, because we can actually incorporate when the PTO is active, not to record excessive idle. Meaning based on the configuration on the unit of the data coming through, if we look at excessive idle and how it's configured, idling would be if the RPM is at a certain level and there is there's no speed, and if it's been exceeding a specific parameter set by the client. But we can also set it up to say, if the PTO is true, don't record it as excessive idle, which means it will still record under the normal idling duration, but not seen as excessive idle. So from here, I can go to my driver that has incurred the biggest cost of excessive idle. I can select the driver, confirm. You would have seen that I clicked the little green button every time I wanted to confirm a selection. And now I can go back to my scoring summary, and I can actually go and see that specific driver's score for the since January over the period of time. So we can definitely see that excessive idle was a big factor for this driver and his driving performance. And we can also see overspeeding as a factor. So since overspeeding is also a factor with this specific driver that we've selected from the excessive idle model, we can now go into our overspeeding module and go and have a look at what events occurred for the period selected for the specific driver. So we can see the time of the day that the specific 4 events occurred. Based on the speeding parameters, it would have provided us with the detail then to say what occurred. So 4 events occurred year to date, the percentage of driver year to date, the kilometers traveled for that driver year to date, and the speed occurrences per 1,000 kilometers year to date, which is very important to see. If I go back to the overview, I can unselect the specific driver that we were looking at, and we can look at all of the drivers and their events that occurred for the site that I have selected. And again, we're looking at a period of time. I can go and unselect my period and look at our current status. So we're already in June. So let's look at June. Where and how are we doing currently? So the information that I'm looking at now would be current to the month of June, and it will compare it to the year-to-date information. But I can go and change that to look at the week-to-date overview. Here we go. Now, I'm again looking at one specific site for this business and looking at the count of overspeeding events that occurred, and then also seeing which drivers actually incurred most of those events. So very quickly, you can go and talk to the specific culprits who is affecting your score from a site level to see if you can find out why are they overspeeding? Is it a training situation that needs to be applied? And again, based on a selection criteria, confirming the selection criteria, we can go back to that driver's score and go and see how that specific driver that's impacting the overspeeding event and what else in the system is affecting that driver's performance. There we go. Now we can also see for the month of June, because remember we've now selected the month of June only, how he has been performing over a period of time, and go and address specific days of the month that that driver has really had a dip in his performance across the fleet. So as you can see, it constantly tells you a story going to and fro between the different screens and the different aspects of information. And you're able to associate the driver information to the actual vehicles that they're driving to see where you can go and make a change within your business to improve performance and to save costs. So typically under the excessive idle, you can go and put a trend analysis in to go and understand, has my trend of excessive idling gone better or gone worse? And who's the drivers that's affecting my excessive idle? And the same with the overspeeding. Another one that I like using is the overall driver performance. So again, I just want to look at year to date. And I have now selected to look at all of the drivers in a specific site. And in here, it will show me the overall score for the last 3 months. And it will give me the current month to date score. And immediately through a status, it will show you which drivers are doing better or worse than their average driving score. We've applied the overall score for the last 3 months so that we allow drivers to continuously be measured against their own performance. So as drivers are actually improving their performance, we want them to continuously improve against their personal best in the last 3 months. On the right-hand side, it also allows you to go and see that information month to month or day to day, depending on your selection criteria, to see how they've been performing. And at the bottom, it actually shows you per event type how the drivers are scoring. The next module I want to show you is more focused around fleet health. Now, fleet health is extremely important because this gives us a very good idea of what is happening within our fleet. So without selecting a specific date range or a specific site, we can go and look at the business as a whole and see how my fleet is performing and how the unit is actually operating to the performance of the fleet itself. So from this, I'm able to identify that I have 781 assets that's operational within the fleet. I have, sorry, let me just refresh the screen. Apologies for the delay. I'm working from home. There we go. So I rely on my internet connection here. So we have the total number of assets, the total number of active assets, and the total number of inactive assets in the last 24 hours. Now, this becomes very important to know how many of my assets has been standing. And this tells us 28 vehicles have actually been standing in the last 24 hours. And there's only been 2 vehicles that is not updated within the last 24 hours. This last GPS position would be based on the unit actually providing a GPS position. And then confirmed for the whole fleet, we have 163 that has been in a workshop for the last 12 hours. Now, if we go down to the bottom, it actually gives us a little bit more detailed information where it will tell you how many assets has not provided position through the FM unit within the last 12 hours. So that the 2 that hasn't communicated in the last 24 hours form part of the total count of 15. So 13 of these assets hasn't updated in the last 12 hours and 15 in total, which is 2 that hasn't updated in 24 hours. Now, why is this important? You know, MiX Telematics is responsible to ensure that all of our clients' units are actually updating on a 24-hour basis. It is our responsibility. And a lot of the time, it is difficult to explain to a client if a unit is not updating, that it could be due to the fact that the vehicle is not operational. Our unit has a very advanced battery management system built in, which means that if a vehicle has not been operational for more than 12 hours, it will actually send a position once in a day after 12 hours. And then after 24 hours, it will actually go into what we call sleep mode and resurface again, once again for the next 24 hours, 12 hours. After 72 hours, the unit will switch off completely. That is so that we make sure that we don't have an impact on your battery of your vehicle at all. You need to be able to switch it on when you get into your vehicle. So there is no impact on your battery performance. And the unit will then only switch on again once the ignition is started. So that way, if you have an indication to see how many inactive assets there is in your fleet, it will give you, you can associate it to the number of units that is not updating. In this case, it's actually quite good, even though that there are 28 vehicles that hasn't been operational for 24 hours, only 15 of the 28 hasn't provided a position for more in the last 12 hours. Another one that we are very excited to show is our fuel module. And the fuel module is a very basic screen that will show you the information. I'm just going to use the selection criteria as well for the fuel module. Where we compare your captured or your fuel slip data with your measured information. So typically in this case, and you can do it from month to month, you could be very specific. Let's go and have a look at a specific time period. You could very easily go and see where there is information that doesn't make 100% sense. And this would be related to measured information compared to your captured information, and look at the trend and the variances of where a problem could be lying. And this can be investigated then on a specific day where you can go and select a specific one that shoots out, and you'll be able to associate it to the sites that has incurred those measures. From these selections, you'll be able to also see, for instance, over here, your entered information, 36.12 liters per 100 kilometer. It's very close to your measured information. And then you would say, but how is it possible for your entered information to be less than your measured information? And this was quite an interesting investigation that we had for this specific account. And it was at the end of the day, we were able to show them that your entered information is typically calculated by the total distance driven, where your measured information is based on fuel use through the injectors. So this is not a detail that is calculated by just dividing it by the total distance driven, but this is actual usage through the engine. This means where you, for instance, only have excessive idling occurring, you would see more diesel being used than just going and dividing it by the total distance or associating it to distance traveled. And it can be investigated on a driver or on a vehicle level by selecting a period of your fuel usage and then going back into your utilization screens to go and see how it associates to the fuel usage as well. So in total, what we were trying to show you is that through the MiX Insight Analyser application, we provide you with a status dashboard that allows you to see information of your fleet and the status of your fleet in total. And through the analyzer portion, we have the ability to allow you to really analyze and view all of the telematics data that is being recorded in a much more intuitive way, being able to see trend analysis, being able to see informative information that already calculates the answers for you across the board and allows you to be able to interpret that information so that it can lead to actionable insights at the end of the day. So that concludes the summary or the show and tell of the MiX Insight Analyser application. And we'll start going through a few of the questions that has been posted on our chat room. So I'm just going to stop the share for this and reshare on our PowerPoint, and I will revert to the questions that is in the screen. Monica, if you can maybe assist me with a view of the chat room.
Ali, thus far, there's only one comment from the chat. It is coming through now. Can you see it?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Ben. Okay, so one question that presents is enriching. Thank you, Ben, from Uganda. How do we get access, Lennon? So you're welcome to contact us. There is a contact list that is available on our Dynamics website, our MiX Telematics website. So you can go and fill in the form. It will come through to me and I will make contact with you, and then we can start making arrangements to see how you can get access, and I'm happy to walk you through the whole process. Craig, so for the fuel model, how do the data captured for the fuel slips? Very good question. So in our MiX Fleet Manager platform, we have multiple ways of incorporating either your browser data or your fuel card data, or even by just giving your administration clerks access to the asset attributes where they can capture the information. So typically, if you've got the asset created in the database and the fuel slips come in, they can manually go and capture it. Or there is a template that they can use from an Excel sheet, which allows them to import it, which makes it a bit faster. And if you're making use of any of the banks, like your typical West Bank, Standard Bank, your Nedbank, all the fuel card suppliers, we already integrate with them. Once you give them approval, they will set it up where daily all your fuel card transactions actually gets then imported into our back end, which makes your data available with your measure data. And then the last one would be your typical browser systems. So we have integrated with most of your browser systems that are available out there, either through a flat file format or an integration service where your browser data is then imported and you can associate it with your Canvas data. So Craig, I hope that answers that question. And then Dan and Glenda, yes, there is a cost for this, obviously to accommodate for the fact that we have to host the BI infrastructure and provide you with licenses to access the platform. We have implemented a cost model, which allows you for a cost per asset, which would definitely be beneficial. And that includes then up to 5 licenses for your typical fleet out there. But that will be negotiated based on your size of the fleet. We do have a scale model, which allows you to then really contract it based on your size of the fleet and your requirement as well. Then Craig, if admin clerks do not have access to the software, can the template or Excel document be emailed to MiX daily? So that's a very good question. What is fantastic about the Click platform and MiX Insight Analyser is that we have got it linked to a platform which we call imprinting, which means, yes, we can actually set up that certain dashboards are created as a report format, that even you as a manager who have access to the BI platform, you can share a scheduled mail with screenshots from those dashboards to your admin clerks that we require the information as well. And by the way, there's no extra cost for the reporting setup. That forms part of the contract of getting access to the BI platform. Any other questions? So all of you are welcome to reach out to me at any time, and I'm happy to do a private presentation of what we can offer. I'm also available if you want to brainstorm the availability of that in your environment. If you don't currently make use of the MiX Telematics telematics offering, we can have a discussion. We currently don't incorporate any third-party telematics devices. This is all built on the MiX telematics platform. But if there are any questions, you're more than welcome to reach out to me and I will make contact with you.